Hey, Cindy and Paula, can you hear me?
Yes.
Looks like we're still missing several planning commissioners. I know Commissioner Highsmith is not joining us today. Can you tell me who else isn't signed into PrimeGov at this point?
Nate Clare, but I saw him on video. Mike Privet and Kamal Pennington and Rusty LaForge.
Okay.
Okay, Michael Privet is on there now, and looks like Nate may be having issues. He's showing disconnected.
I'm only showing 4 planning commissioners at the moment as panelists, so I can't call the meeting to order yet. I just want to make sure we're at 1:30. So
I did log out and log back in, so let me know if I'm showing up now.
Yes, you are.
Paula, do you have me logged in?
I see you, Mary.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm showing, well, I was. There's Rusty, and I've got Privet now, so I've got a quorum. So, okay, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order for March 25th. I want to welcome everybody to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Oklahoma City Planning Commission. Again, it is March 25th, 2021. This meeting today is being held by video conference. A couple of announcements before we get started. If the video conference is disconnected at any time during the meeting shall be stopped and reconvened once the audio connection is restored. If communications are unable to be restored within 30 minutes, items remaining for consideration will be continued to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission, which will be held on Thursday, April the 8th, 2021 at 1:30 p.m. That meeting is also scheduled to be held by video conference. The agenda and documents for today's meeting can be found at okc.gov. For anyone wishing to speak about an agenda item or to speak under citizens to be heard, hopefully you have previously notified staff by phone or email or by signing up online. I will call on you. If you did provide it in advance, I have a list of names and I will certainly call on you at the appropriate time. If you didn't, there will be a time at the end of each item or during each item that I ask if there's anybody that wants to be heard on the matter. That would be your time to speak. You can raise or lower your hand by pressing *9 on your phone or by using Alt-Y, pressing Alt-Y on your keyboard on your computer. In addition, you can mute or unmute your phone by using *6 on your phone or the space bar on your computer. So again, if you want to be heard, the best thing to do is to raise your hand, and I will certainly look to see if anybody needs to be called upon at the appropriate time. When you do call in, your line is automatically muted. And as I said, commission members are different. They're allowed to speak at any time or ask questions at any time during the meeting. Please remember that only one person can be heard. If more than one person speaks, we won't be able to hear either of you. And for anyone speaking today, including commission members, please remember for those folks that are joining us by phone to basically introduce yourself or identify yourself before you begin speaking. As another reminder to commissioners, we've all agreed to be available by video. So your video screen needs to be on at all times. If for some reason, as a reminder, you do need to step away during the meeting, just make sure you interrupt me, interrupt whoever's speaking and say, hey, I need to step away for a moment so we know. And so long as nobody is not present for 15 minutes or more, we'll continue. Otherwise, we may do a roll call. But with that, again, I'll call the meeting to order. Appreciate everybody joining us. And we'll start I need a motion to receive the minutes of the March 11th, 2021 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to receive the minutes for the March 11th, 2021 meeting. Please cast your votes when available.
Hinkle's a yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Hinkle. You're going to voice vote with us today?
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it.
Hit that escape button once or twice.
I just like to make him announce it every time, Commissioner Privet. That's all. Who are we waiting on to vote?
I'm not getting a vote page on my PrimeGov thing.
Janice, I saw you as voting yay.
Escape key.
You showed me as voting yay based on what exactly?
I'm not sure. It just shows you voting yay. Is that not?
So the screen in front of me is still just the agenda. It hasn't come up with the vote part at all.
Janice, if you want to try to log out and log back in, I'll take a voice vote from you on the minutes. And
so
we'll
I would vote yay.
Okay.
I would vote yay.
So assuming that that's only applies to Janice, then those minutes have been approved unanimously by those in attendance. Seven votes in favor.
There it is.
So we'll move to the next item, which is continuance requests. I have several uncontested continuance requests that were published in the agenda. Mr. Butler, you want to read those for us?
Yes, item 13, which is SPUD 1299, deferred to April 8th. Item 14, SPUD 1301, deferred to April 8th. Item 15, case number CE 979, deferred to April 8th. Item 16, case SP 550, deferred to April 22nd. Item 17, case SPUD 1217, deferred to April 22nd. And item 18, SPUD 1292 has been withdrawn.
Okay. Is there anybody that wanted to be heard on any of those items today? It looks like I do have one person raising their hand, which is Tim Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Yeah, so the item 18 was an error. We thought the owner wanted to withdraw it. He called us back within an hour and said, oh, I just want to continue it. So we advised the staff, and we do understand that this will need to be continued for proper notification to the next hearing.
My only question for that for staff is, does this need to be renoticed given that it was on the published agenda as withdrawn?
We will confer with JJ, make sure what the case is, whether it actually needs to be renoticed or just placing it on the continuance would suffice, or with legal as well.
I think you could probably just place it on the continuance because these were just for consideration. And
okay.
So okay. You can make that change.
So Tim Johnson, just to confirm, you wish to continue this case until April the 8th?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments on items that were read for uncontested continuance? Hearing none and not seeing any other hands raised from the public, I will take a motion on those items.
Moved.
I have a motion, and if someone can second on PrimeGov, which Commissioner Privet just did, please cast your votes. We're continuing the items as read, amending item 18 SPUD 1292 to be continued until April the 8th, 2021. Please cast your votes. Commissioner Hinkle?
Yes, please.
And Commissioner Powers, if you need to voice vote, feel free. Excellent. And those continuance requests are approved. Are there new requests?
I'm not aware of any new requests.
Okay, I'm not aware of any either. So I guess I'll ask if there's any items anyone would like us to consider for continuance. All right, hearing and seeing none, we'll move on. Items for consent. We have 3 items on today's consent docket. Mr. Butler, you want to read those for us?
Yes, item 1, PC 10719, application to rezone 3601 South Council Road from R1 to I1. Item 2, case PC 10721, application to rezone 12101 North I-35 Service Road from SPUD 810 to I-1 Light Industrial. And finally, number 3, case number PC 10722, application to rezone 3805 South Prospect Avenue from C3 and I-1 to C3.
Okay. Is there anybody that wanted to be heard on any of those items today? I do not see any hands raised. So hearing and seeing none, I'll take a motion on the consent docket.
I'll move approval.
I have a motion from
Second.
Commissioner Powers, and I'll take a second on PrimeGov. I do have a second from Commissioner Clare. Please cast your votes when available. And Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. All votes should be cast. And that item, or those items, consent items, are approved unanimously. Before we get started, individual items for consideration, I just want to point out one thing. There was a small error on the agenda at the time of publication between items 8, 9, and 10. There are two of those items are companion items. Item that is published on the agenda is item 9 and item number 10. We will hear those items together. So when we get to that point, I'm going to move what is listed as item 8, but it should be item 9. I'm going to move that up, in other words. So just so you know, when we get there, we're going to hear PUD 1812, and then we'll hear PC 10720 and its companion item C7279. So with that, we'll get started. First item for separate vote is item number 4. Mr. Butler.
Item 4 is case number SN092. It's consideration of a resolution changing the name of Hertz Quail Springs Parkway, extending from Quail Springs Parkway to North 150th Street, changing that name to Bogert Parkway.
Okay. Is the applicant with us?
The applicant was the city, I believe, in absence of somebody else. Jared can give us a brief synopsis.
Mr. Martin, go ahead.
Yeah. So this is an application that's being brought forth by the mayor's office and the Ward 8 councilperson to change the name of Hertz Quail Springs Parkway to Bogert Parkway in honor of Richard Bogert. He was a civic leader, instrumental in promoting the growth of business and civic life in Oklahoma City and across the state. He was involved in the petroleum energy industry from the 60s all the way through until he passed away. Starting in the 60s, he worked for Champlin Petroleum. He worked there for 10 years. Then he founded Bogert Oil in 1979 and kept that company until the early 90s when he sold that company. He then founded Bogo Energy Corporation, which still has offices in Oklahoma City to this day. He was a member of and director of several different energy organizations that help have oversight over the energy industry and create standards and different things for energy in our state. And then he was also an avid athletics lover, and he was a lover of Oklahoma State athletics. Also contributed to John Marshall High School football and Heritage Hall High School football. The way the standards are for the city for renaming a street needs to be someone that has had a significant impact on civic life in Oklahoma City, which we believe that he has done. It's got to be the shortest segment of the road or street being requested for renaming this. In this case, it's actually the entire length of it, which is not an incredibly long street. It stretches from Quail Springs Parkway to Northwest 150th Street, so it's the only extent of the street from one end to the other. And then, you know, we don't like street names to be too long, even though we do have some street names that are pretty long. This one definitely meets the qualification. It's not a very long name, so it's not something that would be difficult for people to search for if it were used as a street name in Oklahoma City. And with that, if you have any questions, just let me know.
Mr. Martin, I appreciate it. I will point out for the commissioners, the street naming policy was included in our packets and gave the items that Mr. Martin just reviewed. Staff recommendation on this is approval. I do have a few people signed up to speak on this, and I have another person who's already raised their hand. So I want to get to those people first. I think it makes sense to hear their. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Before we do that, can I just ask, did everybody receive from Thad Johnson a letter of protest? This one is time-stamped 11:44 a.m., March 25th. And I just want to make sure it's that everybody has a copy of it.
I do not have a copy. This is Commissioner Pennington.
It should have come to you by email at literally like at 11:45 a.m. this morning.
Yeah, it was a
Thad
very
Johnson.
late. It was a very late submission, but I did receive it, Commissioner Powers, via email, as you indicated.
You know, it's always difficult with these things because, you know, while the hearing's going on, it's hard to devote your attention both to what's being said and to written material. But the letter is a well thought out and well drafted letter, and I think it does deserve everybody's attention.
I believe Mr. Jurens, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that, but I believe that he has joined us. He or she has joined us to address it. So he signed up to speak. So that's
okay.
The first person I was going to turn to. So I can't see the screen switching around so much, so I can't see if it's Mr. or Mrs. Jurens. If you're with us, please unmute your mic, and we'd love to hear your comments on this at this time.
I am here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, thank you very much. Welcome.
Yep, absolutely. I appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Sam Jurens. I office at 14620 Hertz Quail Springs Parkway. I am Oklahoma born and raised, working a family business that was founded in Oklahoma City in 1983. So now coming up on four decades, we have definitely moved in our past, potentially could move again. But the number one most difficult thing about moving is your address change. It's not something you enjoy doing by any means. And it's a burden on small businesses in order to have to do this. I actually took the opportunity to go around to the local businesses that do bear Hertz Quail Springs Parkway in their name. And surprisingly, the vast majority of those individuals had no idea that this was even going to happen and wasn't aware that this was even proposed to be changed. And also, voiced their concerns to me. It took less than an hour to even talk to these people total in this area. And everybody I spoke to, they agree. The name is lengthy, it's long. No one likes the name, especially it's not relevant now. Costco bought the Hertz Quail Springs building. So Hertz isn't even here anymore. I don't speak for Costco. I don't speak for EOG. That's another business that's on the Parkway. We're very appreciative for them coming in, buying bankrupt buildings in order to save and maintain the Parkway. Who I speak for are their small businesses on this Parkway that voice their concerns to me. They were extremely frustrated, especially in the midst of a pandemic. That has been one of the hardest situations on small businesses, that now the local government, for what seems to be completely arbitrary, has decided to change the street name. My family business sits, like I said, at 14620. This office park, Prestige Park, we have 19 different lots, even more than that in Parkway addresses due to some of the buildings being duplexes. For us alone, it would cost us over $10,000 to make this change that is not necessary. We face both SEC and state regulations that consider an address change to be a material change to our business, that we would have to make these updates, which are not inexpensive for us. In addition to this building alone, I also been fortunate enough to get to build some of the offices within this park. I also own 14642 as well as 14640 Hertz Quail Springs Parkway. I'm about to break ground on 14604 Hertz Quail Springs Parkway, and I just sold 14600 to a Colorado firm back in November who was gracious enough during a pandemic to expand to our state, adding jobs, contributing dramatically to this community, who mentioned they had already ordered over $20,000 of pure financial costs of marketing material that would be rendered worthless. Not to mention the countless man hours and administrative headache it would take in order to affect this change. Within this office park itself, so many frustrations, even outside of things like, updating your brochures, your business cards, your envelopes. They mentioned a digital presence, your website, email signatures, calling, informing countless vendors, utilities, banks, reprinting all your checks, notifying insurance companies, clients, all stakeholders involved. The amount of legal documents your address is on that you expect to do whenever you move, but not out of an arbitrary reason to have a street name changed. Another concern was timely mail deliveries, as well as GPS systems being able to be updated to have clients and visitors be able to find your building in the first place. These are businesses that continue today to contribute massively both to community and the city and this state, just as your proposal had said the honoree did. I do not know Mr. Bogert, and I do not doubt his contributions to the state. I never had the privilege to meet him. I do know his grandson, who I've had the honor to someone I would consider a friend even. But from what I read, I do not believe this honoree would appreciate such a burden being placed on small business without some kind of thought or contemplation to a business grant to alleviate this burden from us and our time and resources spent because of this change. You know, if it's solely to honor him, every small business that I spoke to said, why do it this way? You know, for so many small businesses within this park, you know, we ask that you consider the cost you're placing on us and the time it will take us to handle this change. If you choose to ignore this request, please at least consider a grant, as well as give us ample time to coordinate the effective date so we can liquidate marketing inventory, align regulatory and legal filings. You know, this proposal is said that the only reason it's happening is to honor Mr. Bogert. And why not honor him with the countless amount of parkways that are being paved, and especially in the 8th Ward. The 8th Ward, there's so much land here relative to the rest of Oklahoma City that is continuing to be developed and built on. You know, this would avoid all this unnecessary costs. And I can't think of an adverse cost to someone of naming a new street in honor of someone. So, you know, I do appreciate all of you on the council and the time you guys take to improve our city. And you guys do a fantastic job. You know, I understand this did not become the city it is.
Mr. Jones, I'm going to interrupt you. But
people like Mr. Bogert to get the city to where we are today. We're appreciative of that. But I struggle to understand how this parkway does anything.
Mr. Jurens, the chair is trying to interrupt. Please allow the chair to speak.
Mr. Jurens, we appreciate your comments. Your time has run. I do understand everything you're saying, and frankly, I agree with it. So I think we get it. There's a number of other folks we'd like to hear from on this. So I'd really like to turn my attention there. I wasn't sure if you could hear me or not, if something's wrong with my mic. If I interrupt you during the meeting today, it's because your time is run. So for those folks who have yet to speak, please understand that you have a limited amount of time. That time is 5 minutes. If you run over that time, I'm going to interrupt you so we can make sure that anybody who wants to be heard has that opportunity. So thank you, Mr. Jurens. The next person I had signed up to speak today was Jody Cole. Jody Cole, are you with us today?
I am, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Cole, thank you for being with us today. Do you have additional comments, things that you want us to know beyond what Mr. Jurens shared, which is the impact and the effect and the complication of small businesses having to adapt to such a name change?
Yeah, no, I won't reiterate. I agree with everything that he said, and I won't take up the time reiterating that. I do want to let the commission know I represent EOG Resources, Inc., which I know he mentioned, and we, as a larger company in Oklahoma City, we agree with everything he's saying. EOG moved out to Hertz Coral Springs Parkway within the past 12 months during the pandemic. So they've already had to undergo all of the things he's mentioning related to an address change when they moved up to the Coral Springs area. And they would have to undergo that all a second time if this resolution were to pass. The only other thing I want to mention is EOG is one of the businesses that never received notice of this resolution. If the commission were inclined to pass it, we would ask that it could be continued to the next meeting so that we would have an opportunity to submit written materials in support of what we're talking about, the additional expense and burden that we're required to undergo.
Yeah. We'll see if we get there, Ms. Cole. I appreciate it. There are a few other people on this commission besides me that own small businesses. We all can empathize with the arguments you're having to make. Like Mr. Jurens, I own a registered SEC firm, so I know the challenges associated with that burden are very large. So I think there's some people here that can make comments on that point. Let's see where we get before we entertain a continuance. But thank you for being with us.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry if this is not the right time to ask this, but you know, Mr. Jurens made this comment, and then Ms. Cole made a follow-on to it. What exactly is the notice requirements, question for staff, to property owners who will be affected? I mean, I know that there's a requirement that, you know, a certain percentage of people who are abutting the street support the application for it to even come forward. But what are the notice requirements? How would it be possible that someone who was going to be affected by this had not received any notice of it?
So I can try to answer that, and then Cindy may be able to clarify if I get something wrong. I believe that the requirement is to notify everyone based on the address on file at the county for the owners along the stretch that's being proposed for change. So a notice would have gone out to whatever address or ownership information we had on file from the county at the time the application was made. Is that correct, Cindy?
That is correct. We had 17. We did have EOG resources, but the address on file is out of Houston, Texas. But we had 17 that we mailed to.
Yeah, so I was going to say, big companies are going to go to their main office.
Right.
And I suppose it's possible in a situation like this that there are lessees, who would be very much affected, but who might not ever know that it was happening.
Yeah, they definitely wouldn't.
Since they're not registered as the owner of the property.
Unless their landlord were to reach out to them directly, Commissioner Powers, they would have no idea this is going on.
Right, and it was like my landlord, they won't be reaching out unless they want money.
Not all landlords are that way, Mr. Privet.
Well, I got one.
Any other questions on that or comments that need to be made on that point? Commissioner Powers, does that satisfy the information you needed?
Well, satisfy in the sense that it answered my question, yes.
Fair enough. That may be as far as we can get for now. Alicia Blarkley, are you with us today? It'd be, if you're on the phone, it would be *9.
We got a Langley, Scott, I see. Alicia Langley.
No, I don't, not unless we really butchered it on the who signed up to speak, but I do see somebody else's hand is up. So at this point, Marcus Gowans, do you wish to be heard on this issue?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, wonderful. My name is Marcus Gowans. I'm also born and raised in Oklahoma, lived here my whole life. I recently purchased a building here at 14624 Hertz Quail Springs Parkway under the Gowans family properties, and we call the building Gowans Law Center. My law firm, Dawkins and Gowans Law Firm, that's been in business for 40 years here in Oklahoma City and serving clients locally and throughout the state. We just spent upwards of $10,000 on all our marketing materials to make our move from the Reliance Bank Tower, where we had rented for the last 14 years. And so I've just put up all my signage on the building, inside the building. These are my business cards with our address that go to every client through the mail. It's a massive undertaking to send notices of change of address to all the courts in all of our court cases that are active court cases. And we send them to all the county courthouses because we're a statewide law firm. It's very difficult, time consuming, and expensive to make this change. Obviously, I love it here. It's a great parkway. Again, Mr. Borgett, I don't know him or his family. I'm sure he's a worthy person to honor with a street name. I would just hope that maybe that could be done on a new street where it would be less cumbersome on us who would have to change all of our marketing materials. We just went through a long process with Google to get our map, because now all of your clients just put in their phone your Google address. Well, to get us here at the Parkway, it took a long process with Google to get us on Google Maps and iMaps. And I just shudder to think of the effort in redoing that after I've just done it. Everything that Mr. Jurens says, I agree with. Again, no disrespect to the gentleman that should be honored, it sounds like. I just wish it would maybe be done a different way with a different street that's a brand new street, and still honor his memory without affecting us so difficultly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gowans. We appreciate you having, you giving us those comments and being with us to express your concerns. I don't have anybody else who's raised their hand. I think at this point, I'll kick this over to the commission for our discussion. This is Ward 8, so I'll jump in. I was not made aware of this from Councilman Stonecipher in advance, so I didn't know about this until I got my packet and saw it on the agenda. What I will say is that as a small business owner and someone as a landlord too, I'm very empathetic to the people that are on here and expressing concerns. It is a ton of work, and it's work that right now is borderline infuriating that you'd be asked to undertake, given everything that you've had to go through in the last 12 months and adjusting things and making your business COVID proof, so to speak, and whatnot. And it just, I don't know. I have a really hard time with this one. I think the suggestion was made, and I forgot which protest it made the comment. I think it was Mr. Jurens. There's an awful lot of streets being built in Ward 8 still that people aren't on, where it'd be a lot easier to establish an address in advance. But this is a tough one for me to support, I think. We've had a number of these. It's been a while since we've seen one. But we've had a number of these over the years, and a lot of them are honoring religious leader requests. And every time it's just really, really hard to make these changes, even if it only affects a handful of people. So I don't think I can get behind this one. I'm curious if other commissioners have thoughts or feelings on it.
Well, yes, this is Commissioner Claire. I have a question just for staff. Why Hertz Quail Springs Parkway? I mean, usually when you want to honor somebody, it's because they made a significant contribution to the area. And I don't get that that's the case here. I'm just wondering if it wasn't an opportunity that Hertz has moved on, and so this would be a good candidate for renaming. And I completely agree. There's a lot of new parkways and boulevards under construction that would make a lot more sense, that wouldn't inconvenience folks. So I'm just curious if there was, what's the process when somebody requests a name change, and how on this one specifically did they arrive on Hertz Quail Springs Parkway as the street that should be renamed to Mr. Bogart?
I honestly don't know why they chose this street. I haven't talked to the mayor or council about this one. My presumption was that Hertz has moved on, and it seemed like a natural, if we're going to change that anyway, because Hertz is no longer kind of an anchor in that business park, that they would just honor somebody. If you have to change the name anyway from Hertz Quail Springs to Quail Springs, why not honor somebody in the process? That's just a presumption on my part, but I don't know for sure.
Well,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
In all the time I've sat on the commission, I can't remember the mayor ever asking us for a name change that I wasn't just immediately ready to approve. We have had a number of problematic name change requests, as you indicated, over the years, honoring individuals, very often religious organizations, a church and a street that doesn't really affect anybody but them. And nonetheless, we have avoided doing that just because of the proliferation. I, like Mr. Jurens, have no doubt that Mr. Bogart deserves to have a street named after him. But I mean, I can't listen to these people talking about the impact that this would be on them financially. And I'm a little surprised Councilman Stonecipher will often call out the city for doing things, imposing requirements without compensating people for the cost on them. So maybe this one's not very well thought through. I wonder if it's not going to come down to, are we going to deny this today, or are we going to take a 2-week continuance and see if there's something more to be done here?
Well, I just, for the purposes of everybody, just to clarify, I think we're making a recommendation on this. This will go to city council. Is that correct, staff?
That's correct.
Oh,
yeah.
Of course it will. Yeah.
Yeah,
so the question, I think, for us,
a bit rhetorical. I was just doing that for the purposes of the public, so they know that it's going on. So I
think for
I am
us,
very
the
comfortable
question
recommending
is,
a denial unless somebody has a real objection to it.
And I'm happy, Mr. Chairman, to make the motion myself. I just want to make this comment. I think that for the future, for these requests, there needs to be an attempt by the proponents to have worked with these businesses in advance. Every time I've voted for one of these, it's been because the person came and said every neighbor agrees to it. And so I think that needs to be considered for the policy in general. It's really unfair to these businesses. So I appreciate the speakers coming and making it clear that they were not consulted, because I think they should be.
Yeah, and I think that's enough of a reason for us to send the message along to the folks on city council that, you know, maybe this wasn't the right street, maybe wasn't handled the way that it should have been. We'll let them decide that, but I'm very comfortable with a recommendation denial, and unless there's further discussion, I'd like a motion of that sort at this point.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend denial on SN 092 on the basis of the impact on the people who are operating businesses or live on that street, and based on the potential costs that are incurred for those people.
Okay. I have a motion. I'll take a second on Prime Gov as soon as it's available. And that motion is seconded by Commissioner Coffey. So please cast your votes when available, remembering that a yay would be a vote for the denial. Please cast your votes.
I may have to vote by voice. Again, my screen is not showing me a voting page.
Okay, how do you vote?
I'll vote in support of the denial.
Okay, Commissioner Hinkle?
Yes, I vote in support of the denial.
Okay, I believe all votes have been cast. And that denial is unanimous. Next item on the agenda is item number 5.
And just to clarify that goes forward to City Council in approximately.
It does. It's a recommendation to City Council. Yes, sir, Commissioner Claire, to deny the street name change.
Item 5 is case number PV111, application to vacate a portion of the final plat of Crystal Creek at Westbury, and that is located north of Southwest 29th Street and west of South Morgan Road.
Okay. Is the applicant with us?
Yes, I am. This is Aaron Burson.
Hi, Mr. Burson. Would you start out by giving us your address for the record and then tell us what you want to know about your application?
My address is 2525 Northwood Lane, Edmond, Oklahoma, 73013.
All right. What do we need to know?
We developed this subdivision, and there was 3 good-sized lots there down on the end that backed up to that private drainage easement required by the city. And we placed some fill, did a little bit of dirt work just to give those homeowners a little bit larger building site and a little bit nicer, sloped backyard going down to that creek. We did a full flood study and did the earthwork or just wanting to get that drainage easement line moved a little, further back that syncs up with the new FEMA lines, the OKC's Q50, and allows a little bit more buildable area there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Questions for the applicant on this? Commissioner Coffey, this is your ward, ma'am.
A couple of questions. How many additional home sites do you plan for this particular area?
Well, that subdivision is 74 lots, and we're about a third built out on that.
This particular area that you want replatted, how many homes?
There'll be a total of 74 when it's fully built out. And like I said, there's approximately 21 in there now. We still own 60% of those lots. And then the 3 that would be affected, we own all three of those as well currently.
Okay. And then on the map where you're identifying the Mustang Creek new channel, is that the channel that you're currently constructing?
No, that is the existing Mustang Creek. I believe there's an older channel through there
there's a tributary
up north, I think.
There's a tributary to the creek that runs through there, but I don't know what this new creek channel that's identified there.
And that is a map from the city staff, I believe, but that is the main Mustang Creek there. I know it's moved kind of throughout the years.
Anyone from staff can tell me what that is that's identified as the new creek channel, Mustang Creek new channel?
I think it's probably, so that's just the way we have it labeled in our system, in our GIS system.
Okay.
You know, so I think that's just Mustang Creek channel. I think at one time it probably was in a different place, and they probably have some data that goes along with that, but what's in our active layer for whatever reason just says new channel. But yeah, I would just consider that Mustang Creek.
Okay.
We are not doing any, we haven't done any work in the actual floodway, and very little in the floodplain.
Okay. And are you okay with the technical evaluations?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Well, I've driven down through that area. I like the quality of what you're doing there.
Well, I
don't have any other questions.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Coffey. Any questions from any commissioners? If not, I'm going to ask if folks from the public have comments on this one. Okay. I don't have anybody that signed up to speak. I also don't have anybody that has raised their hand at this point. Just as a reminder, if you wish to, that's *9 on your phone or Alt-Y on your computer. Okay. Doesn't look like anybody wants to be heard. If there's no further discussion or questions on this one, Commissioner Coffey, I think we're ready for a motion, ma'am.
Okay. I recommend approval of case number PV 111.
I have a motion, and I'll take a second on PrimeGov when you are able. There it is. I have a second from Commissioner Privet to recommend approval to City Council on the plat vacation PV 111. This does go to City Council. Please cast your votes when available. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
And Commissioner Powers, do you need a voice vote on this one as well?
No, I was able to vote online.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. And that application is approved unanimously. Next item on the agenda is item number 6, SPUD 1302. Mr. Butler?
Yes, this is an application to rezone 2348 Southwest 89th Street from O2 to SPUD 130. We have a typo here. It says 1301. I believe it's 1302.
Okay. Is the applicant present?
Yes, sir. Tim Johnson here on behalf of the applicant. This is a piece of property that's currently zoned office, and the owner has owned it for multiple generations and has never been successful in getting anybody enticed to do an office development there next to his office, which he's in immediately east. So there are duplexes around us and immediately across the street and southwest of us. There is a good prospect for duplexes in this area due to its proximity to the Amazon. And so that's what we're here before you to do. With regard to the TEs, Item 1, we agree that TE number 2, we'll put in all the sidewalks. Items 1 and 3, we'd ask to delete. Item 1, we believe, is a plat request. And when we come in with a plat, this is just a schematic for you all to look at to see the total number of lots. But when we come in with the plat, we may have a cul-de-sac, or we may have a street that would go to the north. And if we do one to the north, we will line it up with Young's. And then the comment number 3, again, is another plat comment. And we want the opportunity to, the owner and developer of this property has a reinforced concrete driveway immediately adjacent to this property on the east. So we want the opportunity to have our second point of ingress and egress either through a cross-access easement out to 89th Street.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Tim, you know that we are very sensitive when we have these issues that come up, like your issues with item 1 and 3, where the plat will then comply with the PUD, and then we are trapped when we start asking you to align streets because we didn't reserve that right when we approved the zoning with the, so I don't know if you want to take some time to think of some language that would be appropriate to ensure that we reserve our right to hear about and resolve the issues that are brought up by TE 1 and 3, because if we can't, I'm going to vote for 1 and 3 because I think that's totally appropriate. So I think I'm fine with us finding a compromise, but as far as I'm concerned in my vote, I'm not voting for it without us including those items.
I think Commissioner Pennington, if I may, and Tim Johnson for you, I think you could just say if access is taken from 89th Street, access shall align with Young's Boulevard to the north. I think that would give you the flexibility to decide that later. And if it's not taken, then it's moot.
I like that.
I would agree with that. The problem we have with technical evaluation number 3 is, it's not mandatory that we have a private street. It has to be a private drive that is suitable for secondary point of ingress and egress for the fire marshal's office. We have a wide concrete drive that's owned by the developer who may want to allow cross access to be utilized for a second point of ingress and egress. The way number 3 is written, it would not allow that.
And if I could, Mr. Johnson, I'll just add to this. So I participated in a call with Commissioner Hinkle and Mr. Johnson about this item. He kind of wanted to walk through the options that were here on this street. And we discussed this, and it was actually Commissioner Hinkle and I that encouraged him to at least have that discussion, because it would A, prevent access, B, provide a second means, and C, avoid a cul-de-sac, which we know, the city seeks to avoid. They've got an existing means of access, which is a divided median. So it's a really nice point of access onto 89th. So we encouraged him to explore that possibility on the call, which is why I would be in favor of deleting TE3, because if that could be worked out, I think that's the best solution of the 3 options he's got. I would also note too that it's particularly important. One concern I shared with him that drove us to make that recommendation, just so the other commissioners hear this, is they're not proposing a street connection to 89th. Oddly enough, they're proposing an alley connection to 89th. So it's only 20 feet wide. And that's going to be really strange. I won't speak for Commissioner Hinkle because this is his ward. I'll let him elaborate more, but that's a really strange thing for someone in Ward 5 to encounter. This isn't downtown, so that's going to be a pretty strange access point onto 89th Street if you've got a 20-foot sort of alleyway on there. So, Commissioner Hinkle, do you want to elaborate on that, or you have other comments?
I agree with you completely. I'm in favor with it aligning with 90th Street, or them redoing the existing entrance, but the 20-foot alleyway doesn't bode well on 89th Street at 50 miles an hour when you're trying to turn left at 5 o'clock traffic and somebody comes up in that 20-foot hole that you got to hit. That makes a big difference.
Yeah, and you've got a center turn lane there, Tim. I mean, I know you're still working through the items, but
no, there is not.
To add to your comment, Mr. Chairman, is we have posed this to the developer, and he is very interested in the option of utilizing the existing driveway.
Yeah.
So as we draw the plat up, obviously we'll be coordinating with staff on easements and cross-access agreements that would be necessarily recorded prior to the plat.
Okay. Just since we kind of seem to be going in that direction, staff, could someone comment if there's other concerns about TE3 that would prevent us from deleting it or concern you if we were to delete it? Somebody?
I believe this was a track, the Curtis Ligon Development Subdivision and Zoning. I believe this was a paving comment. And
okay.
From the paving section of Public Works.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, he's going to have to pave it. So,
well, the standard, like you were concerned about it being alley width, and the standard rather for two-way drives, we've been in the spuds and the PUD, was 24 feet. And the minimum for parallel parking and parking, I think greater than 45 degrees is 12 for one way. So in a private parking lot. So if it was viewed like that, it would meet those standards, but it's connected to a public street. So I'm kind of off base speaking for them, but.
Well, and I think this is Commissioner Clare. I think the other thing that they might be taking into consideration is, that's a private drive. That existing drive for the office over there is a private drive. They don't know the thickness of it. Public Works, I think typically, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Johnson, but they want concrete paving at 8 inches thick for streets. And so I'm wondering if they're concerned that if it's not up to city standard and it fails, if it's a private drive, then it's on the owner to replace it. So you've got residents coming and going, and they're going to be complaining to the city about their access, and the city doesn't have any control.
To respond to that, the east-west street would be a public street. The drive, utilizing the drive as a secondary point of ingress and egress, is it is a reinforced concrete driveway. The street itself, if we build it in concrete or asphalt, it's only 5 inches to meet residential standards. So the existing drive is a right in and a left and right out. So, and it has a median. So it's as wide as a city street or wider. And it's been there for 30 years. So utilizing it is a good point of visual and exit strategy for the area. We're trying to be creative and not have to put in a cul-de-sac to allow this block to develop to its highest and best potential.
May I ask a question here? As I read, based on what you're saying, Mr. Johnson, about your access to the drive to the east being just secondary for emergency access, the statement of T number 3 is residential access shall be from a public or private street constructed to standards. You're going to take your access onto Country Club Drive, are you not? So won't you have access from a public or private street constructed to city standards out on, can't you meet the TE simply by your Country Club Drive access?
If staff can interpret it that way, and when we come in with the cross-access easement, when we plat, if they're satisfied with that, I'm satisfied with that.
I think Commissioner
Is there something I'm missing here?
No, I think you're making a really good point, actually.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I've actually had a couple of discussions with the streets department or division, and the comment is really we've had 2 or 3 in the past 4 or 5 months developments come through where they've got multiple really small lots on these private access drives rather than private streets and or public streets. And they're trying to avoid developments where we get 50, 75 lots that aren't on what would be a public street that the city could then take over in the future if they needed to. They would be built to city standards. So I think that's just a general comment that leads to a little bit like what Mr. Clare was talking about, just to make sure that is going to be a road, that their main access or most of their access is from a road, so that we can get away from some of these really dense developments that don't have streets.
Got it. That makes sense to me. I think TE3, after all this discussion, can stay. I think TE1 can be amended based on the language that, as I said, is if access is taken from 89, you can finish the TE there. But
we would agree with that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mark Zitzel, 1 East Sheridan Avenue. I think on that, we want a caveat that if access was taken to 89th via a new driveway, it would line up with Young's. If we take access through the existing driveway, that does not have to be lined up with Young's.
Yeah, that's what we're saying. We're saying the same thing.
Okay.
We're saying the same thing. Any other comments on this, Commissioner Hinkle, or thoughts from you? I do not have anybody signed up to speak. Nobody has yet raised their hand. So while you—
No, I'm in favor of the development, just with everybody else's concern on the driveway. I think what we've worked out TE wise, if Mr. Johnson and Zitzow are fine with it, I'm ready to make a motion.
Yeah, we're fine with it. Thank you.
Okay. And so just to make sure, *9 on your phone, Alt-Y on your computer, if you want to be heard. I don't see anybody. So Commissioner Hinkle, if you want to take the stab at the motion, I'll help you with the added language if it's necessary for TE1.
I will move approval on SPUD 1302, amending TE1 to say that if access is taken from 89th Street, that it either lines up with Young's Boulevard or the existing drive cross-access agreement has come to, leaving TEs 2 and 3 in place.
Mr. Zitzow, you were the one who raised the question. Any concern about that motion and the way it's phrased before I take a second?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. I'll take a second on that motion on PrimeGov.
Sometime. It's giving me the move button, not the second button. There you go. All right.
Okay. Commissioner Privet has seconded the motion. So I have a motion, a second, to recommend approval to City Council on SPUD 1302, subject to the technical evaluations as read and amended. Please cast your votes. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Privet says we're waiting on your vote. There we go. All votes have been cast because Commissioner Highsmith didn't hear, and that application is approved unanimously. Good luck with that project, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you for your time.
Next item on the agenda is item number 7, I believe.
Yes, item 7 is SPUD 1303, application to rezone 13700 South Santa Fe Avenue from AA to SPUD 1303.
Okay, applicant present.
Yeah, good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. So this is a bit odd in that you've got this piece of AA property in the middle of otherwise developed area. So you've got a grocery store to our north. We have a modified commercial. We included, we believe, uses that to be compatible, consistent with the street network and the surrounding area. There are 2 TEs, both of which we agreed to and have already submitted a revised SPUD to staff. And we'd be happy to answer any questions.
You are in agreement with both TEs as written?
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. Commissioner Hinkle, this is your ward also. Do you have questions or comments on this item?
No, this spot of the world was built for this right here, so.
Okay. Is there other comments from commissioners on this? I don't have anybody.
I have just a quick couple of questions. We're talking about a freestanding sign of 12 feet with 125 square feet. Isn't there some reason why it ought to be 100 or 100 square feet and 8 feet tall instead? Isn't that kind of our standard now?
I would say that was the standard 8 years ago. Most of the applications that I have been putting forth have been 12 or 15 feet tall. I think that the street network that exists in the area and the signage that exists around, I don't think 12 feet to be something that would be incompatible given the number of buildings that we could potentially fit on the site. I don't view 12 feet to be a sign that is out of character. It is required to be a monument style sign with, no pole signs permitted. So we think it's an appropriate size sign.
And I'd like to add to that we're sharing that road with more, and more sign regulations are different than Oklahoma City's. And so the east side of the road has a whole lot more lenient signage than what the west side of the road there would have.
Well, I'll defer to you since this is in your ward. The only other question that I had about that was, I'm pretty sure I remember that there was a comment in the staff report that plan conformance could be strengthened if the dumpster were moved to the north side of the property. Is that an option?
We don't know exactly where the dumpster is going to be. We do agree with the TE that it has to be at least 50 feet away from residential development. So we think we've got it there. Obviously, until the buildings are built and we see how the thing going to flow. We don't know exactly where, but we do agree to that 50-foot requirement that represents TE2.
Yeah, the application stipulated 10 feet, but the TE changes it to the 50-foot standard we've sort of implemented, which is, twice what the ordinance would require.
Which is great, I have to say, but if there's any option to put it someplace other than next to that residential, I would really encourage you to take it.
We'll certainly look at
that. Drawing, it's possible, but yeah, that could be developed totally different.
Just on the signage piece of it, I always look at the zoning that's going to be underlying the property at issue, and then also the street typology associated with where it's going to go. To me, there are places where 20 or 25 feet still may be reasonable. There are places where that would be crazy, and there are places where 8 feet I think is unreasonable. A C3 property of this size and significance, I don't think 12 feet. I think if I were, if it were me, I'd probably ask for more than 12 feet if I were building it. But so I think it seems fairly reasonable given the circumstances. That's just my 2 cents on the sign piece.
Perhaps
Anyone else have comments on this one?
Quite taller than 12 feet.
What's that?
Perhaps I should have asked for taller than 12 feet.
Perhaps you should have. You didn't, though. If there's no more discussion, I don't have anybody who signed up to speak on this one. Let me double check that no one had raised a hand, and I do not see that. *9 or Alt-Y, please. Seeing nobody, Commissioner Hinkle, I think we're ready for a motion, and this one is as it stands, so you're in good shape.
I'll move approval on SPUD 1303, agreeing to both the TEs.
I have a motion. I'll take a second on PrimeGov. I have a second by Commissioner LaFord. So I have a motion, a second to recommend approval to City Council on SPUD 1303, subject to the technical evaluations. Please cast your votes. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
Thank you. And that application is approved unanimously. Good luck with that project, Mr. Box. Next item, as I said, we're going to take them in the order that they should have been, but not the order they appear on the agenda. So the next item is PUD 1812.
PUD 1812 is an application to rezone 10101 Southwest 59th Street from PUD 1589 to PUD 1812.
Yeah, once again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Mark Grubbs, the civil engineer for the project, is also on the line. Cindy, could you display the illustrative exhibit? Yes, and if you could, it needs to be turned clockwise one turn. So where it says Exhibit B should be on the right side. If not, we'll just we'll work with it. So this is a site that Mr. Grubbs and myself went and got zoned several years ago. At the time, there was no access to sewer or water. Here now, fast forward, the land to our west has been approved with a rezoning case and a plat to develop at just under, there you go, thank you, just under 6,000 square feet. So we now have the ability to access public sewer for some of the lots, perhaps not all of the lots. But generally speaking, west of that creek, we believe the majority of those lots will be able to access both public water and public sewer. And so the PUD before you breaks this into 2 tracts. The tract west of the creek, we propose as a single family R1, no variations, standard 6,000 square foot lot size. If it can be served by sewer. If it cannot be served by sewer, then half acre with water. We believe the majority of it, like I said, will be served by sewer. And then east of the creek, it's a small amount of land, but we propose that to be half acre lots. We have water, no sewer. We have worked with the utilities department, and they are in agreement with our proposal. They have asked us to come up with a 20-foot utility easement for the lots that don't have sewer, so that in the future, when sewer does get there, we will be able to serve those with sewer, and we have agreed to that. So we do have the support for this layout and this lot configuration by the utility department. I want to speak briefly to the TEs. There are a few of them. TE1, as to the street stub to the north, we do agree to that. TE2, All structures and paving should be at least 100 feet from the stream bank. We cannot agree to that, but I think we've got a solution that will perhaps get to the same thing when we get to TE5. TE3, we don't agree to that. We believe half-acre lots to be appropriate. That's what we've asked for. The majority of the site today is actually zoned half-acre, so we're actually greatly reducing the number of half-acre lots that would be on the site. So we don't agree to that. We do agree to TE4. And on TE5, what we'd ask to revise it to is to say common areas / private drainage easements should be adjusted at platting stage to include the floodway and the 100-year floodplain as defined by a completed flood study. So obviously, Cindy, if you could display the aerial, please. When you look at the site, there you go. The area in which where the creek is, it's heavily treed. We understand there's going to be floodway and floodplain in there. We're going to have to do a flood study. And so wherever the flood study shows us that there is floodplain or floodway, we will encumber with common area or private drainage easement. The problem with this whole idea of a 100-foot setback from the stream bank, my understanding is the stream bank is really a kind of an arbitrary point. It's not a defined point on the earth that we could go point to today. So I'm not sure how I could actually, on behalf of a client, in good conscience, say I agree. But we think that having a flood study show us where floodplain and floodway is and agreeing to encumber that with common area or private drainage easement really gets to the intent of what that TE is seeking to do. And then so we agree to TE6. So just to review briefly, TEs 1 we agree to, we do not agree to 2, we do not agree to 3, we do agree to 4, we agree to 5 as revised, and we agree to 6. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Box, just to clarify on TE5, will you read that proposed language one more time?
Common areas / private drainage easements should be adjusted at the platting stage to include the floodway and the 100-year floodplain as defined by a completed flood study. So really all we're doing is adding at the end of floodplain as defined by a completed flood study, and then adding also private drainage easement after common areas.
Got it. Before we jump into discussion from the ward representative, if I could, staff, is that provided language or that proposed language, is that agreeable to staff, or are there other concerns beyond that language we should be aware of?
That is in alignment with what's been accepted in the past with the flood study.
Okay, that's what I needed to know. Commissioner Coffey, this is your ward, ma'am. I'll let you lead our discussion. Mary, you're on mute, just so you know.
Yes, I've had some prior conversation with Mr. Box and pretty much agreed to the language that he is providing in TE5. Also, I think probably his suggestions for TE number 2 are okay in that this is a tributary to Mustang Creek and not the creek itself. So I'm comfortable with his changes to TE number 2. I've not received comments from anyone in terms of the surrounding neighbors or neighborhoods. The property to the south is actually in Mustang, so I'm comfortable with the half acres and that half acre lots, and that's pretty consistent with properties to the south. So I'm pretty much okay with this.
Okay. Mike Wilson, you have your hand raised, sir. Do you have comments on this?
Hear me?
You're on mute.
No, I'm
We can hear you now.
We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to comment for the applicant. The way the plat is being shown, and I know that's a future issue, but they are showing over 30 lots with single access on that, what would be the true north end of the subdivision. So they'll just need to address that when they do the plat.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Any other comments from planning commissioners?
This is Commissioner Clare. I have one, and I talked with Mr. Box yesterday on this, and I think I was in agreement with everything that we talked about and what's been stated now. I just have a question, and maybe Mr. Grubbs can weigh in on this. If we're using the flood study as the determining factor of where the common area is, would that in theory allow, I mean, because all these trees in the existing area are going to act as obstructions. And so would you be able to downsize or reduce the flood area, or what would be designated as flood area if significant tree removal took place?
Good afternoon, Mark Grubbs, 1800 South Sarah Road. The reason I request that David modify that language, I just didn't want it to be assumed that to be FEMA floodplain. Then we would not be able to modify that creek without an extensive permitting process through the Corps of Engineers that is a regulated stream. The intent is not to encumber the trees, but if we did some fill outside of those trees in the low area, then I would then be able to modify that floodplain and encumber it with common area and or private drainage easement. So that was the intent of my modification of that statement. I just didn't want it to be assumed that we would encumber the current existing floodplain with that.
Okay. That satisfy you, Commissioner Clare?
Yes.
Okay. Before we move on, I just want to point out one thing. There is a CPA application associated with this as well that I'm assuming is going to come at our next meeting. My understanding from the applicant was that staff's recommendation of approval on this item was based at least in part on its intention to recommend approval on the CPA. Staff, is that correct that we will see the CPA at a later time?
Yeah, that's right. It'll be at the next meeting.
Okay. I just wanted to point that out to the other commissioners because it was in our staff report. I don't have anybody signed up to speak. I don't have anybody with their hand raised. Doesn't look like. So unless there's further discussion on this, Commissioner Coffey, I do think we're ready for a motion based on just as a kind of a refresher or follow-up. TEs 1, 4, and 6 are agreed to. TEs 2 and 3 are being requested to be deleted. And TE 5 is being amended to read, and Mr. Box, tell me if I say this incorrectly. That's why I had you read it twice. Common areas and private drainage easements should be adjusted at the platting stage to include the floodway and 100-year floodplain as defined by a completed flood study.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Coffey, if you are comfortable with that, that would be your motion, ma'am.
I am comfortable with that, and I recommend approval to the City Council of PUD 1812 amended as just stated.
I have a motion. I'll take a second on PrimeGov. And I do have a second from Commissioner Privet. So I have a motion and a second to recommend approval to City Council on PUD 1812. Please cast your votes. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
All votes should have been cast. And that application is approved unanimously. Good luck, Mr. Box and Mr. Grubbs.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda today would be item number, what is listed as 8, but it's actually 9. It's the zoning item PC 10720. Mr. Butler?
Is an application by, it's an application to rezone 10501 East I-40 Highway from R1 to RA single family.
Okay, is the applicant present?
Good afternoon, Kendall Dillon, Crafton Toll, 300 Point Parkway Boulevard. Stuart Vanderwilly with Hall Estel also represents the client and is on the call as well. Again, this is obviously an application to rezone. Flies on the north side of I-40, about a quarter of a mile west of Westminster Road. As the map shows, it's existing R1. It's surrounded on the east, west, and north by existing R1. obviously on the south by the I-40 or Interstate 40 right-of-way. I think if you look, the application is for an RA zoning, which in essence is a down zoning. You'll see on the accompanying preliminary plat, that's the next item. It's a total of 15 lots. It's compatible with the area in our opinion. You'll notice just to the north of our site, on the west side of Noma, there's an existing RA addition that just recently was put in. So in our opinion, it conforms, and it's a down zoning from the R1 that's there. Staff's recommended approval, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dillon. Mr. Privet, this is your ward. I'll let you lead our discussion, sir.
Yep. Okay. My opinion, this development needs to happen. To address the protests that we had in our packet, as far as the timeline, I don't think we can have any effect over that, but nope. I'm sure it's going to be a lot better than a strip mine of dirt next to your house. So I'm in support fully.
Okay. I do have someone who signed up to speak. Before I call on those folks, I'll just ask if other commissioners have questions of the applicant on this item. All right. Hearing none, the first person I had signed up to speak, signed up in advance, was Casey Reed. Mr. or Mrs. Reed, are you with us today? *9 on your phone or Alt-Y on your computer.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I sure can, Ms. Reed. Thanks for being with us. You got 5 minutes. Tell us what you'd like us to know about this item.
Okay, so my address is 4100 South Noma. This is going to border, this new neighborhood will border my southern and eastern property lines. Our biggest concern, my family's, is the road conditions coming into this area. It doesn't have but one way in, and then it has a dirt road, gravel road. That is the other way. That is, I don't even know if, I guess, an access road to it. I don't even know what it's called. But our road condition right now on Noma is already deteriorated, and it is one single lane. And so I don't even know. I wouldn't even say, my biggest issue is the new traffic that's going to come that's already on the bad road. And it already only has one way back to that back area other than the gravel road. And there's already a lot of traffic going to that area.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Reed. Anything else you want us to know?
No, that'll be all.
I appreciate it very much. I have 2 other folks whose hands are raised. The first person I see is Amber Reed. Miss Reed, are you with us? Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can. Tell us what you'd like us to know about the issue besides traffic.
Okay, so mine was more or less same lines as Casey's. There is a lot of traffic on this road, and there's a lot of people who've been driving in our yard and has broken several of our sprinklers because of this, because the road's only 19 feet wide. And so with all this new construction at the new housing addition across the street from us, all the big trucks seem to want to drive in our yard. And so that's a lot of weight for our concrete there, and then our grass for the sprinklers.
Okay. Thank you very much. I also have, looks like Manuel Aragon, and forgive me if I'm saying your name wrong, sir. Or are you with us? Can you hear me?
He is actually here. This is his wife. My name is Ellen Squire, and I just actually wanted to, we live at 10825 Keene Oaks, so really pretty close. But I would only ask this to be considered, regardless of whether or not this continues as the dirt mine or whether it continues as a neighborhood. Before anything else goes forward with it, I would like it to at least be considered from an environmental impact. I know currently, right now, it seems like the significant dirt that's been removed from the property would potentially have an impact, especially on erosion to the neighborhood, the neighboring properties. But I'm also particularly concerned about the groundwater contamination from the Superfund site, which is just north of us. That trichloroethylene contamination is moving south. And I would just be better, or I think it would be better to know what the potential impact of any further building and or dirt removal in the area would be on that contamination.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate you sharing that concern. I've got one more person I'm going to call on. Before I do, it seems like Commissioner Privet, you're pretty adept at this, or someone from staff. Double check the map for planned capital projects in Ward 4 and see if there's any work planned on NOMA, so we can address that when we get to the end. I have one more
Chairman,
person. Yes, ma'am.
Before we move on, I would like to ask staff whether there is, in keeping with the comments of our just preceding visitor, whether there is any process by which this development will have to go any kind of environmental review, and if so, from whom, and when that might be likely to occur. I mean, it may not be, but if there is one, I'm curious about this.
With most soil disturbance, there's a review by the DEQ, like on development. So on this particular one, I don't know the details of what all goes into that. But when there's a soil disturbance, there's an acreage requirement, I think, and it goes to the DEQ to review that. And then some private property owners do that in case of liability as well, have environmental studies done on their own.
Okay, so there's not a process through the city by which that is required or completed, but it may be that there is a requirement through DEQ.
Is that correct, Curtis? If you're talking to us, Curtis, you're on mute.
There's an acreage requirement, but the city has a jurisdiction under the DEQ for stormwater quality. They do certain inspections and review, even in the process of construction for development on site soil disturbance.
Okay, so the soil maybe not, but the water, yes.
Well, my understanding of it is that that's one of the major concerns, is the discharge of water leaving the site being polluted. Like with, I forget the acronym for it, but that SWP3 or something like that. But that's one of the driving factors behind it is maintaining the water quality of the runoff water and the best maintenance practices that they have to put in place during the soil disturbance.
Yeah, SWIP, Curtis, stormwater prevention.
Pollution prevention plan, yeah, P3.
Does that help you, Commissioner Powers?
Yeah, it does. It does.
It's probably a lot more stormwater prevention than what's going on right now. It's
undoubtedly.
It's not. It's yeah. It's. I don't see how it's been able to continue on this long.
Hopefully somebody's working on our answer regarding the streets, but I've got one more person signed up to speak, and unfortunately your name is not shown. You must be on your phone. So if you want to unmute your phone and you wish to be heard on PC 10720, this is star 6. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
I sure can. Could you please start out by giving us your name and address for the record, please, ma'am?
Okay, this is Mike and Delana Jordan. We live at 3925 South Randy.
Ms. Jordan, we received your letter in our packet as well, just so you know, which I certainly read. I'm sure other commissioners did too. Outside of the road condition on NOMA and water quality issues, do you have any other concerns you'd like to share with us on this?
Well, this gentleman has told the city and everyone else for 8 years that he's going to build houses. And instead he chose to build a dirt strip mine, which in our eyes is illegal on a residential land. And we have listened to this noise for 8 years and we've been protesting it and the dirt, blowing dirt. And we just want a timeline when this will be completed, or at least push him to complete it soon. I mean, we've been listening to this for 8 years.
Ms. Jordan, I'm not unsympathetic to your concern. Unfortunately, we can't dictate the timeline in a zoning application for when construction may or may not occur. If you do have concerns about permitting that may be required that hasn't been handled correctly, or violation of noise ordinances or things of that nature, you can always report things like that to the Action Center.
We have.
Okay. So, and if you've reported those things and followed up, they should give you, you should be able to call in. They'll give you kind of a number or a confirmation number. I forget what they refer to it as, but then you can follow up on the status of that, and it'll either tell you if they were in violation or if they were found to be compliant, or if it's, you know, so you can get.
Well, this has been an illegal dirt mine that he has operated literally feet from our backyard for years. It's very noisy, and we've all had to listen.
Then there's some procedure that can be followed. We don't know that here, and we can't. There's nothing our commission can do about that. Our body can do about that. We're simply looking at the application as it relates to the rezoning from R1 to RA. We can approve that, but that will not establish any sort of a clock or a timeline for which that has to be redeveloped. It does change the use of the property, so it would change certain circumstances about it, but doesn't dictate construction timeline.
But the use right now is residential 1. Why has it been allowed to be a dirt strip mine?
I can't answer that. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry. I don't know where the permit was issued or who issued it, or I'm just not familiar with that, unfortunately.
This is Mike Jordan. I'm Delaney's husband. And right now I'm at work. I'm trying to make this as quickly as I can. Apparently the Department of Mining gave him a permit to go ahead and mine there. And there should have been some other things that he should have gone through before that. And one of those is that he should have gone before the neighborhood and make sure that everything was okay with them. And they never had a voice in that. And other residents who live close to the dirt pit, as well as my wife and I, have additionally had to endure increased traffic noise from I-40, construction noise, and beeping generated by large trucks and excavators, as well as the increased number of displaced coyotes, which kill one of our dogs. Mr. Williams initially told the Planning Commission he planned to build houses. He also ignored a cease and desist order on 4/23/13. That's 8 years ago. His blatant deception and disrespect of his cease and desist order has resulted in a horrible eyesore of destroyed natural beauty with far-reaching negative consequences to homeowners. Mr. Williams needs to pay for those damages and be held responsible. His dirt pit strip mine is extended 3/10 of a mile to the north, is only 20 yards from our backyard. We've had to endure this for 8 years. Number one, our house values have gone down. We've had blowing dirt and just all the time, beeping noise, and it's become just, I mean, something needs to be done quickly. I know there's a timeline when he's supposed to get this done, but in the past, he's always ignored those timelines. He's ignored cease and desist orders. So we want to make sure that all this is done in a very timely fashion and done. He needs to be monitored. And I'm sorry, I've got to get back to work. I'm a pharmacist. I've got to fill some prescriptions. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us, Mr. Jordan. We appreciate you, and Ms. Jordan, we appreciate your comments as well. Commissioner Privet, do you have any other comments on this? Things you think we need to talk about? Any information that you want to share on Noma Road?
Well, I was just looking up code violations for the area. I see that there's 2. I was wondering if staff could enlighten me on what those violations were and why they were abated and what happened there.
Somebody, anybody, staff?
I don't think we have anybody on here that we'd have to get back to you on that one. I don't think we have ready access to those answers, but
okay.
Phil, you want in on Noma Road?
I just saw that they were violations and they were abated. I was curious specific violation and how they were abated, because the whole thing needs to be abated, in my opinion.
We could get those answers, just not within the next probably 3 minutes. We have to.
Got it. And look, as I said, and I hate that Mr. Jordan had to jump off. Hopefully he'll come back and watch later, or if Mrs. Jordan is still with us, she can relay it. It isn't that I'm not empathetic to their concerns or that I don't care. I want to make sure those are directed to the right place. And right now, before this body, there's nothing we can do there. I would encourage the Jordans and staff to examine whether or not zoning violations are taking place, whether or not the appropriate permits have been received and filed and all those sorts of things. And if not, I agree that action should be taken. Commissioner Privet, you might pass information along to Councilman Stone on it too. Just that this is going on, that there are zoning violations that are alleged to have been abated, but we're getting complaints from neighbors. So he's aware of this as this item prepares to move on to city council one way or the other. But nothing we can do about it here is the unfortunate reality of the circumstances we're in. Yeah. Did you look up anything on Noma Road?
I did. We have it.
I did. Noma's not slated for, doesn't have any money allocated to it. The only thing close to there would be Post Road, and I believe it's done already.
Okay, so there are no changes.
I'm sorry, may I ask if the gentleman who is before us on this application is the same gentleman that's been operating, that's been such a source of consternation for neighbors. I guess one question I have is, has there been any outreach to the neighbors in connection with this application? Has there been any meeting or discussion between the applicant and the neighbors? It seems to me like, at a minimum, perhaps it would benefit both sides to have the opportunity to air their questions and concerns, and, perhaps some of them can be answered and some of them simply need to be expressed. But, we do that all the time. So,
well, this is Delana.
It's a hard thing to just turn these people away and tell them that we can't do anything about their issues.
No, for sure. I think that's fair. Kendall Dillon, you're representing the applicant. Can you enlighten us a little bit on these?
Right. And I think Stuart Vanderwille is also on the line. And as far as reaching out to them since this application has been made, we have not tried to schedule a meeting with them. I've addressed a couple of phone calls, and most of the concerns had to do with basically a little bit of traffic on Noma and some of those sort of things. So not in relation to some of the things that's been mentioned here, but maybe Stuart can tell us a little more if he's had any conversations.
Yeah. And this is Stuart Vanderwille.
Jordan.
Ms. Jordan, if you could, I'm going to ask that you go back on mute and stay there, please. If you'll raise your hand, I'll call on you again when I get to the appropriate time, okay?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so this is Stuart Vanderwille. I'm with the Hall Estel firm. My address is 320 South Boston, Suite 200 in Tulsa. To answer Commissioner Powers' question, no, I have not had any contact with Ms. Jordan or her husband or any of the other neighbors. But to address, I guess, some of that background, this preliminary site work, and it has gone on longer than certainly our client would have liked for it to have gone on, but part of that relates to the acquisition. And if you're looking at the kind of the site plan there, it's shaped like a boot. That part that connects to Noma Road was only recently, in the last handful of months, acquired. So while there is, I guess, technical legal access to a public way, that's I-40, and we know that we're not going to have access to I-40. So development has been a bit of a challenge until that additional piece was acquired. So most of what you've seen is what I would call preliminary site work. Was it done in an order that differently than what you would have preferred? Possibly, but those practical access issues prevented some of that. So I don't know if that helps. If you've got other questions, I'll certainly try to answer.
Well, I am glad to have that information, and it's helpful to hear. I think it might be helpful for the neighbors to hear. I would really like to see you take some time and reach out to your neighbors, express to them, what the difficulties have been, try to give them some assurances what you're doing to work out those difficulties so that they do not continue. and see if you can assuage any of the problems that they are perceiving with respect to this application.
I would be happy to do that, ma'am.
Okay. I don't mind a continuance, especially if it means more engagement.
Yeah,
like I said, this area needs help. Noma Road's part of it, but this strip mine's been a pain in the butt for years.
And my only comment as to that, I don't know that the application is in conformity with the subdivision regulations. I don't know that we would want a continuance. I'll certainly have conversations with the Jordans and whomever else you would like me to have conversations with. Certainly get that achieved before we get to city council stage on the rezoning. But the reality is this is as it's currently zoned, could have a larger number of lots built. As Kendall mentioned, this is a down zoning to fewer yet larger lots. So I'm certainly happy to have those conversations between now and city council action, but believe that the application is appropriate for approval per staff's recommendation.
The other question I have is about your access. There appears to be some sort of service road there. I'm actually not familiar with this area on the ground. Do you have access onto a service road there or not?
This is Kendall again. I think it's a little bit questionable. There's an existing gravel drive that's inside the I-40 right-of-way that in essence kind of services that frontage road. However, on the companion item that you'll see next with the preliminary plat, there's a TE to place a limits of no access along that, which we are planning on agreeing to. So with the development of this, there will not be access to it.
Okay, thank you.
And the one thing I'll say on the Noma Road issue is, even though some of the folks that had spoken to us earlier, are not going to like hearing this, the best thing we can do for them in terms of getting Noma Road on the map is to put rooftops there. It sounds like from what staff said, there's no plan to do anything with Noma Road. And the only way that's ever going to happen is if there's extra houses and folks there that will merit it becoming more of a priority for Ward 4 street improvement. So I think the best thing we could do is put some housing over there if we wanted to see something like that get improved. Commissioner Privet, where do you stand on this, sir? Do you want to entertain a continuance to request them to have time to talk for us to explore these permitting issues and other challenges? Where are you at on this?
Yeah, I would. I could go either way, but like I said, more engagement the better. If we could get Councilman Stone in on it too, it might help.
Can I interject, Mr. Chairman?
Of course.
I think I'm always for there being consensus and for neighbors being heard. From everything that I've heard from the neighbors' concerns directly have nothing to do with the existence or the proposed development, except for the street issue, which we're trying to address. I think we can move it forward and they can have these community meetings between now and council. I don't, because the issue, if they fully develop as planned, it doesn't sound like there's any objections to that. There is reasonable and very understandable objections to the way that they've been currently operating in that space, which I would happily join in on anything to condemn what's been going on currently, because it sounds terrible. But as far as this application and the merits of this application aren't really what we're talking about as far as this continuance. So I would recommend we move it forward. I would strongly recommend some community meetings happen though about what's currently going on there.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at. I don't see how any of this stuff really applies to a down zoning that's recommended for approval by staff, but I'm very cognizant that there's neighbor frustration here that has frankly very little to do with the development and a lot more to do with maybe the conduct and operation of the property owner over the course of the last half decade plus. Before we entertain any kind of final comments, I want to circle back to a couple of folks that had raised their hand, and I'll start with Delana Jordan. Ms. Jordan, I'm going to give you 60 seconds, ma'am, just because we need to wrap this up. But do you have anything else you want to hear, anything you want to respond to about this?
I agree with the man that just moved forward with it. But I want to just reiterate, though, that he's been deceptive all along with all this. And we've reached out to the Department of Mines, the city, the county, the state, everybody. And the Department of Mines has continually put us off and sent us letters. I can send you all the letters about all of this. I mean, the State Department of Mines has treated us horribly. And we have made many attempts to get this reconciled. But I would move forward with this development and monitor him to make sure he's going to do it this time, because he's been extremely deceptive. Thank you.
Fair enough. What I'll say too, we had another one of these cases recently in, golly, I think it was Ward 5, that was a mining issue next to R1. And we figured out that the state had actually issued the permit. It had nothing to do with the city. My suspicion is that that's probably what happened here too, is that the state issued a permit that's not in conformance with the underlying zoning. So that's probably where the confusion has occurred, is that the state has issued a permit, but it's not zone right. But at any rate, Casey Reed, you've got your hand raised again. Ma'am, I'll give you 60 seconds as well if you have any final comments or something you want to address.
Sure, this is Joshua Reed. I'm her husband at this property. And as she explained to y'all, we border on the south side and the east side of his property. And when I bought the property, I was going to protest this meeting but I've since talked to Matt, and you were wondering if anybody had talked to Matt Williams. And I also talked to Kendall Dillon with Crafton Toll and Associates. He informed me that there's no code that would say that I needed a privacy fence along my south and east side, because what I stand to get now is staring at the back of eight to 10 houses, staring at their backyards and instead of trees like we've had it for the last 8 years since we built here. And I have 5 kids, so my privacy is being invaded, but I know land evolves. And I talked to Matt, and I also talked to Mr. Dillon, and Matt agreed that he would make it right by putting up a privacy fence, at least on that south side. Mr. Dillon said that it is not required, but I have talked to Matt, and we seem to work out our protest. I'm not sure about the other neighbors, if he's talked to them that personally, but from what I've gathered, there's no code saying he has to, and he said he would. So that's where I stand.
Okay, we appreciate it, Mr. Reed. Thanks for making time to join us here. Okay, Commissioner Privet, what's your pleasure, sir?
And I still favor continuance on this so we can work out our issues and then come back.
Okay, I'll respect that. If you want to work with the applicant and you want to kind of help make sure we get everybody together, I'll support it just in the name of you having a chance to sort of try and work through it.
Yeah, other than that, like I said before, I fully support the application. Like I said, something needs to happen here. In high school, we lovingly referred to that as the road. That's where everybody went to underage drink. So that may still go on. I don't know.
Every high school area's got one, man. Every high school area's got one. Okay, any objections to the continuance? Because if not, I think that's where we are.
When's our next meeting?
Our next meeting would be April 8th. I do have somebody who's got their hand up. Well, this went down. So our next meeting is April the 8th. So that would be the continuance if you think you can get with them before then.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
The applicant in agreement of that?
Right.
Stuart, can you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, we would certainly prefer to move it forward with the understanding that, and I'll certainly give you my assurances that Kendall and I will get together with these folks that we've heard from and have those conversations, and can maybe give a more fuller report as to those conversations at the city council meeting on the on the rezoning part of it. I mean, if the concern is from a obviously 2 weeks in the grand scheme of things is not a earth-shattering amount of time, but in the spirit of getting things moving in that direction, that would be the way we'd like to go. But I certainly understand the request, and if we need to, we will.
Okay.
I just think it'll make the whole thing go a little smoother if we can get this resolved before council.
All right.
Get at least some people some warm fuzzies about it.
Understood.
That sounds like a motion to me. Let's make it and see where we are.
I'll move to continue case PC 10720 to the April 8th meeting.
I have a motion. I'll take a second on PrimeGov to continue PC 10720 to the April 8th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Coffey, so please cast your votes. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. All votes have been cast?
No, they have not. I'll voice vote yay.
Thank you, Commissioner Clare. Appreciate that. And that continues to approve unanimously. The next item on the agenda is the preliminary plat for it's the companion item for the zoning.
Isn't that applicant Mr. Williams? Do you have my email, sir? privdog@gmail.com.
Stuart or Kendall, did you hear that?
What was the question?
I was just going to give the applicant my email and my phone number, or either or, if you wanted to get in touch with
Okay, I have it. I'll supply it to him.
All right, cool. Thanks, Kendall.
You bet.
Next item is item 10, the companion preliminary plat item C7279. Given the continuance of the previous item, I think it makes sense we continue this item to the April 8th meeting as well. If there's no discussion on this, I'll just take that motion.
Yeah, same motion.
Mr. Chairman, before you have that vote, is there any way, just if there are other issues that we need to work out on that between now and then, that way we can.
Well, what I will say is that we're told in the staff report, outside of the potential need for a variance, that the design of the preliminary plat is in conformance. So are you going to need the variance?
No, I think we'll agree to provide the right-of-way stub to the north.
Okay, so you're going to have.
We won't need the variance.
You will not need it.
No.
Okay, so Commissioner Privet, do you have any other concerns on this item you provide feedback to the applicant on before we take a continuance?
I do not.
Okay. Stuart, I'm sorry, I can't see your last name or I refer you by that, but do you have any questions on this?
No, I just wanted to make sure that we could.
No, I appreciate it. I'm glad you spoke up.
Thank you, sir.
If there's no further discussion on this from commissioners or concerns, I'll take that continuance, Commissioner Privet.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry.
I'm sorry to insert myself here one more time. But with respect to the plat, a question that I will want to have answered when we get to that point is why they're not connecting to the neighborhood to the east. You don't have to tell me now, but when we're looking at the plat, I'll want to know the answer to that question.
Got it. It's private street, but
it's not really a neighborhood either. I mean, yeah, a private street off of Westminster.
Okay. Commissioner Pruitt, I think we're ready for the continuance, the motion itself.
All right, move to continue C7279 to the April 8th meeting.
I have a motion. I'll take a second on PrimeGov, which I got from Commissioner Coffey, to continue C7279 to April the 8th, 2021 Planning Commission. Please cast your votes. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
If anybody else needs to voice vote, please do so. All votes have been cast, and that continuance is approved unanimously. Next item on today's agenda is item number 11, SPUD 1297. Mr. Butler.
This is an application to rezone 14800 South Sooner Road from PUD 1422 to SPUD 1297.
And Mr. Chair, I apologize, this is Rusty. I unfortunately, as I had mentioned, have to leave at this time with 2 items requiring a separate vote left. I apologize, but I have got to step out.
We maintain a quorum. Thank you, Mr. LaForge. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Is the applicant present? Surely so.
Star 6.
You star 6 to unmute.
I think one of those phone numbers is Doug.
Yeah, he was worried about this, so let's just give him.
Star 9 or Alt Y as well.
Mr. Kirk.
Curtis Liggins, you have your hand up. Do you have information for us on this one?
Mr. Kirk, can you hear us? Mr. Chair, it's Ben Kirk is the person that should be speaking, I believe.
Excuse me? This is Nathan Cook. I'm an associate attorney here. I was listening in. Mr. Kirk is available. Let me find him real quick, please.
Are you the applicant?
Mr. Kirk represents the applicant.
I see him both on there.
Okay. I have a hand raised too from a phone number, but I'm going to ask this number to unmute.
This Curtis, he submitted some revision while we're waiting on him to come to the line. He's submitted a revision revising the buffer width from 5 to 10 feet in the rear.
Yeah.
And we sent that out to you commissioners, but just want to make sure you had it.
Yeah, I received it. I've got it right here.
Yep.
Was received via email today. It's just a revised drawing showing the enhanced buffer. I'm going to give 30 more seconds, and then I'm going to go ahead and move to item 12, and we'll just come back.
He was just sitting there. Oh, there he is. He switched computers. Somebody unmute him, or no, he's unmuted now.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
My apologies for the technological problems, but this is Ben Kirk on behalf of the applicant. And my address is 210 Park Avenue, Suite 1200 here in Oklahoma City.
Excellent. What do you want to tell us about this? We continued it from the last meeting, had some discussions. Obviously, we corresponded via email. I know you had some correspondence with Commissioner Privet as well. If you just want to highlight where we are today, I think that would be helpful.
Yes, I would. The purpose of the application is to facilitate the development of a Sonic Drive-In restaurant on the south 1.38 acres of the affected property. Currently, it does not have the use permissions for eating establishments with a drive-in or fast food with drive-through window. So that is the motivation for the application. Since the application was vetted with staff, as you indicated, the applicant has communicated both with you and with Commissioner Privet. We've made some additional adjustments to address the concerns that the two of you have expressed. Notably, the speaker separation from the adjoining residential property has been enlarged from 60 feet to 70 feet. And the landscape buffer was increased along the east from 5 feet to 10 feet. And then at your request, Commissioner Cravens, we agreed to do an 8-foot board-on-board overlap style fencing along the east segment there on the drive-in property to help with the sound baffle for the residential area there with the site screening. So with those adjustments, we believe the application is appropriately before the commission.
Commissioner Privet, this is your ward, so I'll give first comments to you, sir.
Yep. Yeah, I think me and Doug talked about it, and I think we mitigated the best we can the issues we had, and then limiting this to the southernmost site.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they've done everything they could do to try to mitigate it. It's Apex Fences board on board, which is the same thing that I had requested of another applicant that was in Ward 8, Collision Works site or something like that. I can't remember exactly who it was, but or who the applicant was. But that's if the purpose of a fence is to mitigate sound, that's really the only way to do it. Gaps in a cedar fence are not going to mitigate somebody ordering a slushie. So they've done all they can do. I think I'm very comfortable with it. As I told Mr. Kirk last meeting, you know, I think this area is very appropriate for commercial development. We just have to do it in a way that's sensitive to the adjoining residential. And I think he's done the best he can do. So I'm curious to see if other commissioners think we've missed something or if there's disagreement about what we've done to this point. Doesn't sound like it. Commissioner Privet, I don't have anybody signed up to speak on this one. And I don't have anybody who's got their hand raised. Let me make certain.
God, I see a hand raised.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Cindy. I have a phone number who's asked. I'm going to ask them to unmute at this time. It'd be *6 or *. Looks like *6 because I got a phone number. So if you'd like to be heard on SPUD 1297, this is your opportunity.
Chairman Craven, this is actually Doug Wallace. I'm traveling today. I was just listening in as I was able to, so no comments. I think Ben presented the situation well, and I appreciate your feedback and Mr. Privet's as well.
You bet. Thanks for being with us today, and thanks for your time and the correspondence to work on this.
You bet. Thank you.
If there's no further discussion from commissioners, Commissioner Privet, I'll take a motion if you're comfortable making it.
I am. I move to approve, we had SPUD 1297, or move to recommend approval of SPUD 1297 to City Council.
I have a motion to recommend approval to City Council on SPUD 1297, subject to our agreed changes to the master design statement as articulated into the record. That's been seconded by Commissioner Pennington. Please cast your votes when available. And Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote, sir?
Yes, please.
All votes have been cast, and that application is approved. Good luck with the project, Mr. Kirk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, commissioners.
Item number 12 on today's agenda. This is our last item for separate consideration, which is an ordinance to be introduced in separate public hearing. Mr. Butler, you want to give us the intro here?
Will do. Ordinance to be introduced in separate public hearing and recommendation on April 22nd for an amendment to Chapter 59 Zoning and Planning Code, Article 2, Definitions, Section 592150.2 of the Oklahoma City Code as amended, and it pertains to general definitions, amending the definition of dwelling to include manufactured homes, modular homes, mobile homes, and house trailers.
Is there somebody else from staff that wants to provide some additional context here?
This is Susan. This ordinance was requested by Councilman Stone and Councilman McAtee. And basically, they just wanted to expand the definition of dwelling to include those other type of residential homes that people live in, such as manufactured homes, modular homes, mobile homes, and house trailers. Currently, our ordinance excludes those. We would still leave the definition of exclude travel trailer from that definition because that's more of a recreational type vehicle. And that's basically the reason for the ordinance amendment. I don't know if you have any questions concerning it.
Have we had a bunch of cases that this language has affected, I assume?
Well, there's a few ordinance provisions that we identified, maybe 4 or 5 different ordinances that have certain type of setbacks from like uses that might be incompatible. For example, like a landfill or something like that, which would say, you know, you need to be 150 feet from a dwelling. Well, that didn't include a manufactured home. So they did not have the same type of protections as, you know, your stick-built houses.
Gotcha, that makes sense.
Susan, have we done the review to make sure that we're not creating here some kind of weird exception where all of a sudden somebody can go plant a mobile home on an R1 lot somewhere?
We did have everyone review it as far as in code enforcement, as well as the building code, and I had the zoning code people, and we did not see that it would cause any type of problems. I mean, there is, there would be a non-conforming use provision that's existing in the code. So if, for example, there was already one there, it may not apply to them if they were there first. But we didn't identify any problems.
The only thing I would say is it only excludes travel trailers. I mean, would that exclude a tent or some other kind of dwelling they might have if it's not a trailer?
Yeah, I don't think that would be covered, because this is saying that the definition of a dwelling is any building which is designed for use for residential purposes, including manufactured homes. I don't think that a tent would be considered to be a dwelling that's designed for residential purposes.
What about tiny homes? We had an issue with that. Gosh, it's probably been, Sarah, help me out here, a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago now. And we kind of crept along with it, where we sort of identified that we don't really have code provisions that apply to them separately. Should we include tiny homes?
That modular, maybe?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I asked when code, I guess the building code people looked at that. I mean, we still felt like a dwelling would be a tiny home also, but
yeah. Not limited by square feet. It's just any building designed for residential purposes.
Yep. Mike Wilson, you have your hand raised, sir. Would you like to add comments to this?
Am I there now?
You are. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. The Development Center has already been working on looking at some code issues, possibly for tiny homes that might not meet our full residential standards. Right now, we say they have to meet code, just like anything else, stair tread and risers, railings, all that kind of stuff. My concern with this, we have what used to be called mobile homes. They didn't like that term, so they changed themselves to the manufactured home industry instead of mobile homes. So, but those homes are not built to meet construction standards of our codes as far as residential. The wiring, other life safety issues, window sizes, all that stuff, they aren't designed to meet the residential code. And I'm concerned, and I don't know that I've heard a good answer yet, that by changing this definition of dwelling, that single family dwelling, the land use is not going to allow these structures that don't meet the residential building code. That would be the only concern to me about changing the definition of dwelling and how it applies to land uses and developments.
But that wouldn't be changing it under the building code, would it, Mike? I mean, it would just be changing it under the zoning code. It'd be specific to Chapter 59.
It would, but that's the part of building a home is you have to meet the zoning code and the building code. And if you say in the zoning code that now you can have a mobile home in R1, then we have to allow people to have mobile homes. Mobile homes aren't required to meet the residential code. They meet a mobile home standard or what they want to call a manufactured home standard, wiring and everything else.
I don't think that this though would change any of that, because you're still going to have your individual types of dwellings, which the zoning code would apply to, such as a manufactured home or modular home or any of those type of things. So I don't see how that it would affect any of these zoning. I mean, change the zoning or allow a certain type of.
Susan, is this just changing the definition of dwelling under Chapter 59? So it's just making the term of art under Chapter 59?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the way I was interpreting it. I mean, I'm not saying, Mike, that that you're wrong or that your concern isn't valid, but if I have a legal document I'm reading in Chapter 56, I'm just using random ones, okay? If Chapter 56 says that dwelling is defined as something under this chapter, Chapter 59 can define dwelling differently, and the only applicable definition for it would be the one in its own chapter. So I think if you just change the term dwelling as a term of art within Chapter 59, it's only going to apply to the zoning code specifically.
I would tend to agree with you. I just want to be sure that that's the way everyone's going to look at it, and that we don't have this problem come up later that, oh, now we changed the word dwelling to mean something different. And so now our code's all messed up. And there's a lot of, the word dwelling is in the residential code a lot. I mean, it's in the Chapter 59 a lot.
To be really clear about this, I mean, if we're going to introduce this today and set it for hearing, and we think we've got time between now and the date of hearing, that'd be fine with me. But between now and then, or if we feel like we need to continue it now and decide before we take action, that'd be fine with me too. I don't have a strong feeling about that one way or the other, but I want us to be really, really clear about this before we act on it.
Can I add to Janice's point? I think it would be nice for us to have a legal memo of some kind from our council about ensuring that the impact long-term, to all the points that Mike is addressing, that we've looked into this to ensure we're not creating any set of problems. And so a memo between now, I'm okay with it being set for hearing now, and as long as we can get some kind of memo assuring us that there are not any legal issues in the future, I would feel comfortable.
On a different note, I will just say that I think the intent of this, and again, I didn't know this was coming till it showed up in my packet, but I think the intent of this ordinance is fairly obvious and it's important, which is that we're trying to create protections for people who may live in, you know, a lower cost style of housing that have not traditionally been afforded residential protections, but who are deserving of those protections the same way that my neighborhood is or any other neighborhood is. I think that's really the point of the ordinance, which I think at its core is very, very good. But I think you're right in that we need to ensure that it's unambiguous. And I'm sure legal is working through those issues, but I agree that we should be sure before we send it along that we've done that due diligence ourselves. Any comments from other commissioners on this?
I will just sort of add on to that. I'm curious about, I mean, this is all about definitions, whether the term house trailers is a defined term, if we know what that means, and it's not just an RV or whatever. You know, what's the difference between a house trailer and a manufactured home?
There is a definition. I'll just have to find it.
Well, you don't have to find it right this minute. I'm just asking whether it is in fact a defined term.
I would not today, but I would love to know how it's defined too. That's a good question, Jana.
Commissioner Cravens.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to point out, it's Marilyn Lemonsnorth with the Planning Department, that there is also a definition called dwelling units. And that's where it's defined that it's a structure where you can eat, sleep, and cook. And that's, if you look in Chapter 59, most everything is related to dwelling unit. And then I think what Commissioner Stone was talking about with this definition is a lot related to code enforcement. You know, the distance, what he was talking about of the houses from other parts of the code. But if you look through, most of the provisions in Chapter 59 say dwelling unit, like DU.
Got it.
There's two definitions.
Yeah, I will tell you that as far as a definition of travel trailer, the only thing I found was it's included within the definition of recreational vehicle. And so they define recreational vehicle as, you know, a vehicle not exceeding 40 feet in overall length, 8 feet in width, 12 feet in overall height, primarily designed as a temporary living quarters or recreational, camping, or travel use. And there's some more definition to it. And then it says the terms fifth wheeler, motorhome, truck, camper, travel trailer, and camping trailer shall be considered the same as a recreational vehicle. So that's
what about house trailer?
House trailer?
Yeah, the term here is house trailer.
Oh, okay.
Be travel trailer to me.
Yeah, we could probably delete that if that is not defined in the code anywhere.
Oh, yeah, I just want an explanation.
If it's not I'm not code, I agree that it should be deleted.
Right, because I know they define manufactured home, modular home, and mobile homes.
Yeah. Well, I'm with Janice. I think we've given you some feedback. If there's no other feedback that varies from other commissioners, I think we can set it for introduction. And hopefully by the time it comes back, we have great answers to these and we're prepared to explain them more fully, because it's not quite a month, but real close. Any other comments, commissioners? If not, I'll take a motion. And that motion is to set the ordinance for introduction and public hearing on April 22nd.
So moved.
Wait just a minute. I think, isn't this the introduction?
Well,
and what we're doing is setting it for public hearing on April 22nd?
I shouldn't have said introduced. I should have just said set for public hearing. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I move to set this ordinance for public hearing on April 22nd.
Thank you, Commissioner Powers, and thank you, Commissioner Pennington. I'll take a second on PrimeGov, which I got from Commissioner Privet, so please cast your votes when available. And Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
That should be everybody. And that ordinance is set for public hearing on April 22nd, 2021. That is the last item on our separate items for consideration. All other items have been continued or deferred to later meetings, which brings us to additional items. Planning Commission committees. We had not formally established at the last meeting the committee. I know there's been some dialogue back and forth. Commissioner Powers, do we want to formally set that committee in place? And if so, who are the members and what should we call this committee?
You know, I think that question is up for discussion. After doing just a little bit of preliminary poking around, I think Commissioner Hinkle and I are both a little bit uncertain about what the mandate for such a committee would be. It's like, what is it that we're really trying to accomplish here? And then, you know, there's a whole separate list of questions about how you would go about accomplishing that goal or whether it would even be possible. I did not circulate to everybody, but you know, we did reach out to Commissioner Pennington, because he had been very vocal at the last meeting about what it is we're really trying to do here. And I think, you know, if it comes down to just the fact that what we really like to do here is find a way to convince people that before they buy property, they ought to do a little bit more poking around. They ought to satisfy themselves that property nearby, maybe in particular vacant property, but maybe not, you know, is zoned the way they would like it to be, or, you know, couldn't be rezoned. And so, I mean, once you actually start trying to articulate what it is you hope to accomplish, it gets very murky very quickly.
Yep.
As I pointed out in my response back to Commissioner Hinkle just preliminarily, part of the problem is that in Oklahoma, when there are documents that are signed to purchase real property, whatever somebody told you about whatever they're extinguished in those writings. I mean, the writings control. And the fact that your realtor told you that, oh, this big, beautiful meadow next to your house would never be developed, that's really not even actionable civilly, as I understand it. And certainly it's not something, you know, that you can go back to the person who sold you the property and say, well, the realtor told me, or, you know, or to go back to the realtor and say the developer told me. And I just want us to be clear about what it is we think we'd like to accomplish before we dive into that.
You want me to, I mean, I'll take a swing at it if you want.
Do please.
I think it's really just about, from our seats as planning commissioners and from the feedback we've gotten from the public, are there any tools at our disposal that we can use to improve notice to the public? And a lot of that stuff is really outside our purview and our realm of control and authority. You know, if nothing else, maybe they just are a set of suggestions or recommendations that we could, you know, author to either the city's governmental affairs person or lobbyist, just so we can say we did. But the reality is that, you know, there are a lot of principles that are going to govern and dictate those rules that we're not going to change. You know, I was thinking about it after the fact, after our meeting. I just was kicking things around, and about the best idea I could come up with for a means of notice is that on the disclosure form, which every buyer is required to obtain from the seller of the property. The seller has to sign it. It has to be signed, in my memory, I'm going off memory at the moment, but I think it's within the last 6 months it has to have been signed. That discloses, you know, does the microwave work and all that. There's also a series of questions on there about flooding and HOAs and all kinds of stuff. About the only thing you could do is have that statutory form, which is written by the Oklahoma Real Estate Commission, amended to include a statement that any home buyer should consult with the, you know, municipality's zoning website to ascertain, you know, land use regulations of this property and surrounding properties, right? But they're not going to do it. I mean, they're otherwise to require anything, you're not going to get anything that changes due diligence requirements past the realtor's lobby. And you're not going to get the state to do anything that's going to modify it. So I agree with you that it would be very, very challenging, short of just saying, you know, to our lobbyists, to our government affairs person, here are the things that we hear from the public the most consistently in our chairs as planning commissioners that are complaints. We're passing these along. That's about the only thing I think we can really do. And if, you know,
I think I think that's pretty close to encapsulating it. You know, I had suggested almost half jokingly, you know, that maybe we could do a little public service kind of spot for Channel 20, you know, suggesting to people, you know, if you're thinking about buying property in Oklahoma City, here are some resources on the city's websites that you might want to look at, you know, with links to the zoning, you know, maps and, you know, that kind of thing. Alert them to the whole idea, even of just like district overlays and, you know, that kind of thing. But, you know, the idea that we're going to be able to impact, you probably are aware of this as a lawyer, but the only reason why people who are buying property within a homeowners association where they are required to pay dues, the only reason why they have to be informed of that is based on litigation. Went all the way up to the Supreme Court. You know, some guy who said wasn't paying his dues and had a lien slapped on his house said, "Dues? What are you talking about?" You know, and they said, "Well, it's all public record. You should have known." And, you know, after much hue and cry, the Supreme Court finally said, "That's not good enough. If you're going to take money out of people's pocket, you know, and be able to slap a lien on their property, you have to actually notify them in writing." Well, so now there's some boilerplate on a disclosure form that everybody signs, nobody reads. And, you know, it's not really helping.
That's on that.
You know, the very, absolutely. And the absolute most I think that we could hope to achieve in that direction would be to modify that form. And that would be World War III to get that done. I just don't think it's you know, worth the effort. I don't think it would happen. I don't think it would, but yeah, you know, maybe we could suggest to the, you know, city's lobbyists that here's something you might want to do with your spare time when you're thinking about it. Find a way for us to suggest to people that they look around a little more.
Yeah. It's a hard thing to try and tackle because, again, we have very limited tools, and I'm just not sure that when we got done, there's much we could do to really make an impact for folks. So I'm not at all saying that we failed in our mission if forming the committee seems, you know, futile, because there's not really a clear goal to accomplish for us.
I have a hard time seeing it. I really do. But yeah, I would like to hear from the other commissioners.
Yeah.
Quickly, I think I think that all of that is definitely the political reality of where we are, and that all makes sense to me. I think along the same lines, because you're saying, Commissioner Powers, the same kind of thing that I said when it came to the school issue and building new property is like, your remedy is not with us. Your remedy is with the legislature. So we don't have anything to do with that. And I think maybe I just would like to see us think more creatively about ways. I think that PR campaign is a good idea. Maybe there's something we can think outside the box about ways to address some of these, like these recurring issues. Maybe it's just us sitting down with developers and saying, y'all, come on, we're going to take you to task. We're going to embarrass you in these meetings. If you don't stop putting us in this position to have to be the villain for you when you make these false promises to people. I don't know. I think that we might just need to think through this more. And I just hate for us to just drop it until the next crisis. And we've got 100 people here telling us how bad we are at our jobs and how much we don't care about them and their families and the enjoyment of their property. And so even if it's something that's a little more symbolic, I'd rather say that we've done something that we understand that this is a serious issue that does need to be addressed, even if it's politically impossible for us to actually resolve it ourselves. So,
well, why don't you guys, I mean, look, you guys aren't in a quorum. There's nothing to prevent you from continuing the discussion to see if you can settle on it and stew on it. If there's something we should do or could do, we should do it. And I'm in favor of trying. I'll let you guys continue to talk about it, and we'll bring it up at the next meeting again and see if it's something we want to continue to advance or we want to let go. So.
Well, while we got you all here, does anybody else have any 2 cents they want to chip into the pot? I mean, does anybody else have anything that they want to say about what they think they'd like to see accomplished or even, you know, how we might go about it? But I mean, just the goal, if we can, you know, be clear about what the goal is here.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Clark. I think it's just an educational effort majority is going to be first-time homeowners. But it might not be necessarily first-time homeowners, but, you know, educating them on the things that they need to think about. And I think, yeah, you know, the elements that we've discussed, you know, being able to look at land use and the other big thing, you know, easements. If you have an easement on your property, what that means, you know, being the president of our neighborhood association for several years. You know, we would get all kinds of inquiries about, you know, OG&E has got my backyard and you know, to access their pole, and I'm putting a lock on my gate so they can't get in there because my dog got out or whatever. And it's like, well, you know, they have to get back there and they have the right to do that. And then, you know, technically city owns public right of way. So a lot of people don't understand that their front yard actually stops probably 10 feet behind their, you know, before the curb. And so, you know, I think it's a lot of just basic stuff that most of us that are familiar with, you know, planning and engineering and property, you know that most people don't think about. So I think I like the idea of the PR campaign, you know, as an educational effort. And maybe there's some grants out there that the city could apply for. And I'm thinking of, you know, if there's a website through planning, you know, through the planning, okc.gov/planning, it's, you know, for first-time home buyers or just, and that you could just do a kind of a checklist. Here's the things you need to think about. Here's a link to, you know, the zoning map and et cetera. You know, something along that lines. I mean, that could at least be a step in the right direction.
Thank you. That's good. That's good input. Anybody else?
I'm going to kick in and say that the real estate contract that I sent to Scott and Janice, I got from Senator Paul Racino, who is a realtor, and Glenn Cosper, who is the guy who's in charge of the Realtors PAC for the state of Oklahoma. And when I told them what I was trying to do, they both rolled their eyes and said, heard it before. It's all in the real estate contract. People just don't read it. So echoing what Janice said, trying to get somebody to read something else at closing or before signing a real estate contract is way out of our purview, but the educational part of it would be pretty simple to do on Channel 20 and, you know, lots of different avenues, social media, print media, billboard media, all that kind of stuff. So just my 2 cents.
That's kind of what I would like to see is our meetings more readily available, not just on, you know, Channel 20. I don't know many people that even have Channel 20. I know we got YouTube, so I mean, there's that. YouTube would be the better way to educate, in my opinion, than Channel 20. I guess is what I'm saying, or something similar, you know. At this time, you know, the way things go and the internet and everybody's.
That's good input too. Thank you. Anybody else?
My only thing that I would add, Janice, if you guys decide to push forward on some things, would be trying to figure out how to get the you know, HP guide and rules and guidelines book in people's hands that are buying in historic overlay districts. That's the only other thing that has come up that I think would be appropriate to consider, you know, within your group's purview that comes to mind about issues like this that I've seen over the past.
Oh, I absolutely, and not just HP, but, you know, any kind of overlay that's going to actually affect. Yeah. It's important for people to know that.
So. And I, you know, I don't want to be too cynical about this too, but the idea of educating people, although, you know, I love our spirit, oftentimes these arguments that we hear, at least half of them are made in convenience, right? Meaning that whether someone did or didn't tell somebody something, it's probably half true and half not true. But it makes for a really good argument at the time, at least in their mind. And it's convenient to ignore things, no matter how much you try to put something in front of somebody, whether it's in a real estate contract or on Channel 20 or on YouTube or whatever else. People are going to pay attention. They're going to hear what they want to hear. And they're going to remember what benefits them. But it would just be great.
You know, that is especially true when it comes to somebody wanting to buy a house they've fallen in love with.
Amen.
You know, all of the objections in the world, you know, title problems, whatever. It's like, we don't care. So. Yep.
No, it is. I mean, it just is. And, you know, like I said, I'm not trying to be too cynical there. It just, it would be great if there was something on that disclosure form, because then it's like, hey, look, when they come and they complain, oh, this is always going to be a field. Look, you were told to look at, you know, the zoning map. And if you didn't do that, then you didn't do that. So anyway. All right. Well, I appreciate y'all's work on this, and we'll revisit it next meeting and see if any progress has been made or any decisions been made. Next item on the agenda is Planning Commission members. Commissioner Claire, I'll start with you.
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Powers.
You know, actually, I do have something. I was not going to talk today, but it has come to my attention in a couple of different ways, both because of cases that we've been looking at here and also calls from other people, that there are issues with the Bike Walk OKC thing that I'm not sure we were entirely focused on. And as I was trying to answer some of them for people, I was trying to sound very positive of the fact that the Planning Commission has approved the plan for Bike Walk OKC, but I'm not absolutely 100% sure that's true. But when we did, I think we looked at it more in terms of general policies and not so much, maybe not at all, in terms of specific applications. And there have been a couple of things that have come up recently where, I've been made aware, well, Bike Walk OKC would call for this or this to happen at this location that really impact some zoning decisions. And Rob Littlefield, who is the Ward 2 traffic commissioner, has also been talking to me about this. And I understand that the Planning Commission has requested that staff come and give them a very brief presentation overview, but then a lot of time for questions and answers about sort of the specific application of certain things in the plan. And since they're going to do that anyway, I would really like to have them come and kind of give us the same treatment. I want to be able to sort of mull over how the adoption, or really more the implementation of the plan, will affect businesses and residential properties, and also just our job as planning commissioners, how it's going to impact some of the decisions that will come before us.
We can certainly do that. Yeah, we, as you mentioned, Rob Littlefield reached out to me and made the request that we kind of present to them Bike Walk OKC and also, how it relates to what they do. So we're going to be doing that in April. We're happy to do that with the Planning Commission. We are, as we've mentioned, we're updating the plan and going through the process right now. So we certainly did anticipate to do that at some point. We're happy to do it sooner if you'd like, because the process, playing itself out, it's going to take a few months, but we'd be happy to come and talk about that and answer questions.
Thank you. I think that would be very, very helpful. And I'd like to circle back to a comment that Commissioner Pennington made earlier about more interaction with the Traffic Commission. There's this very unfortunate division between the Traffic Commission and the Planning Department. The Traffic Commission is really a creature of public works. And, we don't have a real way to interact with them on a regular basis that I think would be, it really just makes sense. It's like, I don't know how we've gotten this far along without having done something about it before now. The idea of merging departments is beyond my pay grade, but the idea that we should have some ability to interact with them more, the traffic calming issues that just, repeatedly come up for both commissions, and they're kind of left to deal with them after the fact. After there's a problem, then people come to them and want something done about it. Whereas the idea of anticipating and implementing and building that kind of into the planning process just makes so much more sense. I would really like for us to do a little bit of exploration, failing departmental merge, which, as I say, is beyond my pay grade. I would like for us to have a little bit of thought process about how we might more often, more readily, and more effectively communicate and interact with the Traffic Commission.
Well, I do recall that we did a joint session when I was on Traffic and Transportation Commission. We did a joint session with Planning Commission. Of the 3 years that I was on there, I think that happened once.
Once, yeah. It's the only time it's ever happened.
Yeah, so
doesn't even come to our yearly deal.
So
they don't, because they're not part of the planning department. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Right, yeah, they haven't been invited.
They don't come to that because they're not part of the planning department, so.
Commissioner Claire, do you recall what year that was in?
maybe 16 or 17.
What was it kind of what was the format? I mean, was it a kind of a?
It was just a joint session, and it was held in the Embark conference room, just to kind of discuss as the two groups as a whole, just ways that stuff that Planning Commission, reviews and approves might move forward to Planning Commission or to traffic transportation and vice versa. Like traffic calming was a big one. And it's like, how can, we were seeing all these subdivisions come through that had long, internal roads that speed was an issue on, with no traffic control devices, stop signs, yield signs at intermittent points, whatever. So the question was, what can Planning Commission do? Well, again, like we've talked about so much, we just talk about land use, and that's really what we can talk about. We can't tell them how to design their streets and how to lay out their streets the majority of the time. So that really didn't go very far. So it was, I think what it came down to was how can Traffic and Transportation Commission better have some kind of say in street design guidelines. And I'm not necessarily sure that that's where that should happen. And maybe that should happen on, in planning, but what new procedures and more authority could either commission have that kind of helped guide better neighborhood design?
And that was really kind of all around the whole idea of developing that toolbox of traffic calming and traffic design for for the Planning Commission to have some kind of an idea what we could encourage developers to do. And yeah, I was trying to think what John Yokel was still chairman, and it was probably a couple of years even before. So, I mean, that's been at least 5 or 6 years ago.
We can look into that. And, I mean, but that does make a lot of sense. If you all would like to, we can explore doing a joint session again and kind of exploring some of those areas of overlap. Traffic calming is still an issue. In fact, that was one of the things that Mr. Littlefield asked about, because bike facilities are traffic calming tools. That's one of the functions that they have. They've still been working on that. In fact, I thought they were going to be implementing some new tools soon, so I'll have to follow up on that. But we can certainly put something together like that again, so that you all can kind of get on the same page with them. They can understand what your thinking is on some issues that relate to what they do and vice versa. And
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that.
Nate, before we have that meeting, we need to know whose side you're on.
Team PC.
Okay, Commissioner Coffey.
No, nothing from me.
Okay, Commissioner Privet.
Nada.
Commissioner Hinkle.
Good, thank you.
You bet. Commissioner Highsmith is gone. Commissioner Pennington.
Nope.
Okay, Commissioner LaForge is gone. Only thing I've got is, Jeff, would you mind following up to make sure that the letter that was sent to the city manager, city council, and mayor's office, which I did receive a response, just so you guys know, from the mayor's office, from Mayor Holt, on the letter we submitted regarding the school issue. Was that letter circulated? Did Kim Cooper Hart circulate that letter to the other participating school districts? I sent it to the small group, but I didn't send it to the larger group. Can you confirm with her that that was sent to those districts?
Will do. I'll check on that.
I appreciate that. That's the only thing I've got. Planning Department, Jeff, we're back to you.
I don't think I have anything to bring up unless you all have a question for me.
Okay. Anybody? Hearing none. Development Services, Curtis?
We're good.
Okay.
On that statement, it's in our staff report in the drainage comments about the stormwater quality review and any disturbance of land over a half acre. So in the drainage comments, it's in there in the staff report.
John, about our earlier discussion on the strip mine?
Yes, sir. And there's also a complaint. I didn't want to mention it during the meeting, but that there's a complaint process that the city has that's actually tracked through the action center that the department has to reply back to what they found or whatever process they're going through.
Well, I didn't do a great job of that, but that's what I was trying to articulate to that applicant, because I filed things through the Action Center on my app numerous times about blighted structures and stuff like that, and you can go right back to it and see what the status is.
Right, and you saw what Boyd sent, right? There's a
I did.
big old long list since 2010 of violations.
Yeah. Yeah, back to, I think it was Commissioner Pennington that said this, though, about something else. I think it was in our study session today, but I mean, that's great. That's a violation. There's no teeth.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, they can file a mechanics lien, I guess, or whatever.
Keep us updated on that before the next meeting. Municipal Counselor's Office, Susan, anything?
Nothing.
Okay, citizens to be heard. I don't think anybody's even with us.
We have a hand.
Do we?
Yes. Joel Dixon.
Okay. Mr. Dixon, we'd love to hear from you.
Howdy, I'm Joel Dixon. I'm at 1020 Northwest 34th Street here in Oklahoma City. Just listening to y'all discuss on some of the planning commissioner stuff. And I was listening to Commissioner Clare's comments about the street design and, what can the planning commission do as far as traffic calming, and it strikes me, and maybe it's because I sit on the stakeholder advisory team as we're looking at the development codes for the city of Oklahoma City. But one of the biggest things that we can do, either as planning department, planning commission, within our development codes, is two things really. Network streets, so making sure we have good gridded street network and having short blocks. Those two things combined are absolutely something that falls under the purview of the Planning Commission and our development code documents that have a direct impact on calming those traffic issues and helping to slow the cars and make things more hospitable for users of our streets other than just motorists. And I think that's important. I wanted to bring that up.
Okay, we appreciate your comments. Jeff, you have anything you want to say to that or add to that?
No, as you all know, we're all about connectivity and the comprehensive plan is as well. And we do, there are various ways, of course, to enhance connectivity in the city and to work that into our codes, and we certainly plan on doing that as we move forward and as we look at the subdivision regulations, because we know that the more if you have internal connectivity within a section, then you're going to have less, you're going to have better traffic flow on the arterials. People are going to be able to get places faster, and emergency response is going to be better. It's just, it's been shown many times. And so, we, as you all know, we deal with that issue, and there are sometimes compelling arguments why we can't or shouldn't make a connection, but that's always our preference. So we definitely want to reinforce that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Butler. I don't have anybody else with a hand raised, do we, Cindy?
No, I'm not finding anyone.
I don't see anybody either. Okay, just making sure. I don't have any other business, so at this point, I will take a motion to adjourn unless there's other discussion.
Motion
to adjourn.
Okay, and I think I had two people there, so I'll count that as a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thanks, guys. Everybody have a great Friday and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
You too.